Welcome to my second December video where we're going to be installing MS-DOS 7.1 on a HP Thinclient T5710. This is one of the best Thinclients that you can get for MS-DOS because it has a nice ATI graphics chip and it also has native Sound Blaster support. If you have a different one, the tutorial should still mostly apply though. Right now it's running Windows XP, or at least trying to run Windows XP, and we're going to be replacing that with MS-DOS 7.1. To do that, we're going to first have to create the USB stick for MS-DOS. There will be a link in the description with two files. There will be my VIA DOS driver installation pack for the sound card and, of course, Ultimate DOS boot stick. To correctly be able to write this to USB stick, we're going to have to run it as administrator, otherwise it won't detect it. And then we're going to click on Reformat and Write on the whole device. Select the USB stick of choice. It's going to create a 2 GB partition, so use a USB stick of roughly that size. A little bit larger is fine, of course, just don't make it too large or you might have detection issues. If your USB stick doesn't work with the Thinclient, then try a different one first before trying anything else, because I have heard they are a little bit picky in which ones they like to boot from and which one they don't like to boot from. We're going to click OK, and the process of swapping the partitions out is very quick and has already been completed. Now we can use VIA DOS as the package that I've provided for you. And we're going to be dragging these folders on top of the partition that we've just created. Now you have everything you need. We have MS-DOS 7.1 on a USB stick and we have the Sound Blaster driver. Now we're going to eject this and we're going to insert it in the Thinclient. After that, we're simply going to power cycle the Thinclient. It should already be in a state where it boots from USB. If your one has been BIOS modified by the previous owner where it doesn't, you can press F10 repeatedly and then change the boot order around. I'll show you that real quick. So I'm very rapidly pressing F10. It will be in the Advanced BIOS Features tab. Make sure that USB boot is the first option and then ATA flash is the second option. If you have a different Thinclient that you're following along with, then of course you will not be able to follow those exact instructions, but I'm sure that your Thinclient will also boot from USB by default. Once that's done, you're now in the Ultimate MS-DOS 7.1 startup menu that you might recognize from the last video that I've made on this. We are going to rapidly change the settings to all the default ones by just pressing Enter a couple of times. And now that we're in MS-DOS 7.1, we're going to be able to partition the hard drive of the Thinclient. This is a step I think most of you will get stuck with different tutorials or different methods because the Thinclient is drive letter D and drive number 2. It's not drive 1 and the C drive because we're booting from a USB stick. We're going to need to use a partition managing tool that can handle this, and the one from my pack that does is part. So we're going to be typing part, and now we have Ranish Partition Manager. To change to the correct drive, we're going to press F5. So we're pressing S5 first, and now we're on hard disk 2. Now we'll show you whatever is currently on the drive. In my case, it's Windows NT and TFS for the Windows XP partition you saw earlier. To clear this out, select all the partitions that are there, and then press delete. So you press delete, then you go to the next one, you press delete, etc., etc. Once they're all clear, go back to number 1, and then press the insert button to create a new partition. If your Thinclient has less than 2 GB of space, which is normal for these Thinclients, then you can safely choose FAT16. This will be the most compatible option for you. If you have a larger one, like I do, then it's better to choose FAT32. Then you can use the entire drive space for your DOS games, and the ones that specifically need FAT16 are very, very rare. We're going to choose FAT32 for my system. And now we have the partition table set up. The second part we'll need is something that lets us boot Windows 95 and MS-DOS installations. To install the correct bootloader, we're now going to press the letter U. And it's going to say standard IPL code was installed in memory, press F2 to save changes. We're now going to press F2, and it's now written this partition table, including the new bootloader that's correct for MS-DOS, to the Thinclient. After that, we're going to reboot the system. You can also do this with Ctrl-Delete if you have two hands available. We're now back at the USB stick, and we're going to repeatedly press enter once more. And now we're going to install MS-DOS on the correct partition. To do this, we're going to use my setup command, and we're going to let it copy from the C drive to the D drive. So from the USB stick to the internal partition that you've just created. If you get an error here and it says abort, retry, or fail, choose the fail option and you'll get the format question anyway. Mine doesn't because it's been correctly formatted in the past, but on a lot of these systems you will get that question, as you could see in my last video. Now we're going to proceed with the format. It's going to very rapidly format the partition. It's going to ask if you want Windows 3.11 Mini installed, which I'll do. And now the installation of MS-DOS has finished. There's one more thing that we want to do. We want to install the VIA Sound Blaster driver via tc.bat. So we're going to execute via tc.bat. It's going to automatically set that up for you, and now we're fully installed. So if I eject the USB stick, the Thinclient is off, but the video likes to hang sometimes. I'm going to turn it back on. You can see that Ultimate MS-DOS still works, as it has now been installed to the internal drive. And you can also see that the VIA Sound Blaster driver has been successfully installed. The address for this will be 220 IRQ7 DMA1. Now, if your Thinclient model doesn't have this native Sound Blaster Pro support, then you'll need to find a different driver if yours has one. Perhaps you'll have one of those Thinclients where you need to add a sound card yourself. But for this particular Thinclient, you are now completely set up. You can play any game that you want. And one easy way to get the games on there is to use a different USB stick or format your USB stick again that's not bootable. And then you can have the USB stick present in the Thinclient while you start it up, and it will create a D drive for you. That is the USB stick where you can copy everything over. Of course, it's recommended to have a FAT32 USB stick, because otherwise you'll have to use the anti-fez driver and it will be read-only, which I do not recommend. If you want to slow down your Thinclient for gaming, you can use the CPU SPD command. And most of these Thinclients, at least mine, they aren't very responsive to a lot of these settings. The one that reliably works is the T option for the throttle states. It will have 16 of them. If you change it to a lower number, such as number 1, that will be the slowest option that you can pick, number 16 being the fastest option. So you could see that their command was very slow there. If we change it back to 16, it will now be its regular speed again. The other command that we can use is the slowdown command, which is a software-based utility that also always works for these. Here you can specify the speed that you want and change the speed with some key bindings that are all explained to you if you do the /? option. If you want Windows 3.11, like we shown you before, and you want to use the mini version of it, it's the Win 3.11 command, but you might notice that it will not work. It errors out. That is because the EMM option is in the way. If you want to use Win 3.11, we reboot the Thinclient, and then you choose the HiMem option instead. Using this option, we can once again press enter a bunch of times, type Win 3.11 again, And now you'll have a very minimalistic Windows 3.11 for your basic Windows 3.1 games. I'm not aware of any drivers for Windows 3.1, so for a Thinclient like this, your mini Windows 3.1 should be enough. If you want the full one, you can of course copy the setup folder of that to your system and just execute it like normal. That will work just fine. If you end up going for that route, I recommend not installing the mini version while you're installing MS-DOS. That is it for this video. If you want to see a little bit more about this DOS floppy or the floppy version of it, you can check out my last one. If there's other things you'd like to see, for example me installing Windows 98 on one of these, let me know. The installation of Windows 98 takes very long, so I'll only make that video if people actually want to see it. If you want to see it for my actual retro PC instead, which is mostly similar, but it's a very cool retro system with 2 graphics cards and 2 sound cards in it, then let me know that you want to see that one instead. I might make that video in general, but if there's a lot of interest, I'll be motivated to make these quicker. I am curious to hear your thoughts. If you get stuck with anything, let me know. There will be links in the description of all the files that I've used for the video, and happy retro gaming!